Kennedy and AOC decided to endorse the sitting incumbent president for re-election, Joe Biden, even though there are two primary challengers that he has, Marianne Williamson and RFK Jr., as well as a third-party candidate who's running, Cornel West, who supposedly espouses ideas that AOC at least once pretended to believe in, much more so than she pretended to believe in the ideology of Joe Biden. She not only endorsed Joe Biden without even waiting to see who would be running against him. It's still possible there could be other primary challengers that he has. She didn't even pretend to extract any promises from him. Remember when the right wing of the Republican Party, when Kevin McCarthy needed their support to become House Speaker, they very openly refused to give that until they extracted all kinds of promises about how power would be wielded in the House in a much more diffuse way. She didn't even pretend to do that. And then to add insult to injury, the place she chose to unveil her endorsement is the podcast Pod Save America, hosted by Obama administration national security officials who are complete and steadfast loyalists to the Democratic Party. You wind them up and they heap praise on not just the Democratic Party, but it's on all of its leaders. It's basically a place where the Chuck Schumers and Nancy Pelosi's of the world go to talk to their loyal flock. So let's look at her doing this, and I'm going to I don't even have to ask you a question, Nick. You're going to be all ready just to spout all sorts of things once you hear this. So I'm going to subject you to this one more time, and I apologize in advance. But for anyone in our audience who did not see it, here is AOC formally endorsing the current Democratic incumbent president, Joe Biden.
The president's only primary opponents are Marianne Williamson, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Haven't been any rumors about anyone else even thinking about jumping in. Will you be supporting Joe Biden for re-election?
I believe given that field, yes. I think he's done quite well, given the limitations that we have.
He's done quite well, Nick, given the limitations that he has. So let me just go on. I just needed to stop that there and note that.
I do think that there are ebbs and flows, as there are in any presidency. You know, there are areas that I think were quite strong when he came right out of the gate with the American Rescue Plan. And of course, the Inflation Reduction Act was a massive step in terms of our climate agenda. But, you know, there are also areas that I think could have gone better. We have major structural.
Did you hear how she phrases her criticisms? There are things that could have gone better, meaning I will admit he's not perfect. All right, let's just finish this.
Issues in this country. And I think it starts with the United States Senate. And I think that until we have senators that are willing to stand up and stare the filibuster in the eye and stare a lot of structural issues about the Senate, and the United States Senate will be what holds back this country from an enormous amount of progress.
So she was willing to admit reluctantly that Joe Biden is not, in fact, perfect. There are things that could have gone better, but she very quickly added that it's not his fault in any way. It's the fault of the Senate, particularly Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema, and it's the Senate that needs to be fixed for Joe Biden to be perfect, but he's certainly extremely good and therefore merits her endorsement. What is your reaction to that, Nick?
That shows how AOC's job is just to do PR for the Democratic Party, because she's head faking to the legislative branch as if the left's biggest criticism of Joe Biden is what he has not done. Our biggest criticism is the fact that he's about to start World War III because of AOC. And AOC used to stand for abolishing ICE. Now you have Joe Biden, who's funding ICE $6 billion more than Donald Trump, deported more people than Donald Trump. Now this is not an issue she cares about. She pretended to be a climate activist for clout for years, and now she endorsed a president who is spanning out the Willow Project, who is a fracker, who actually did more public drilling than Donald Trump. But she's not a climate activist when a Democrat is in charge. She's a climate activist only when a Republican is in charge. And I think this shows how weak Joe Biden is right now. Because in the last election, they had to make a progressive task force to head fake and pretend that they're going to get progressive policies. There's none of that now. And there's zero excuse for anyone to endorse someone with a horrific record like Joe Biden a year and a half before the election. Their job is to lead workers off a cliff and undercut our negotiation power. Now is the time where we had the most negotiation, and AOC seeing how weak Biden is in the polls, often also because RFK and Dr. Cornel West, who is already polling at 6%. So they can't even play around. They was given the order to endorse immediately, which shows how weak Joe Biden is that she had to do this.
Do you remember the time in 2018 when she picked out a really striking outfit, all white? It was very dramatic, and she put it on, and then she went down to the border and she posed in front of a camera that was wielded by her staffer in front of that fence overlooking a parking lot. But it was eventually, if you traverse that parking lot, you arrived at the place where migrants were held, and she posed in these very pained and anguished ways because she was so deeply moved as a human being about the cruelty at the border. Nothing has changed at the border. Absolutely nothing has changed about the border. And she has not even gone down there or even barely mentioned the border. And the thing I genuinely don't understand is how people don't end up being offended by this. The fact that they just so blatantly trifle with people's emotions in ways that prove so completely inauthentic.
And that's the argument that we make at Revolutionary Blackout. Who's really worse, Glenn? Joe Manchin, we know he's an asshole. He stands on yachts and shout down protesters. I don't know if you've seen that famous video where he was on a yacht shouting down protesters. Openly takes millions of dollars from big oil and all these corporations. So his mindset is, if you vote for him as a leftist or as a worker, it's kind of your fault because he's not hiding who he is. I will make the argument that it takes a special kind of evil and maliciousness to do what AOC and Bernie Sanders has done. And the professional managerial class, for the most part, has protected them from the reckoning that is going to come. This reckoning, and you see the increased anger about AOC and Bernie. Even Jacobin now has the balls to criticize AOC and Bernie Sanders now, just because there's overwhelmingly dislike over her. And her politics has failed. It's just a fact. If you look at how she is as unpopular as Kamala Harris, even though she quote unquote support popular policies, that because her politics and her willingness to be just a PR agent of a Democratic Party while stealing working class people's money has grossly offended the real left. And she knows this. That's why she had to go on Pod Save America. She can't even go on social Democrat-like channels. She has to go full establishment because she lost any support from the left. Even people that are to the right of me had enough of AOC and her fake gaslighting nonsense. And my friend, Comrade Missy, predicted that she's going to be the next Nancy Pelosi, and that's exactly what's going on. When you look at her pro-war votes, when you see how she's whipping support for the Democratic Party, that is exactly what her role is right now. She's completely abandoned the left, and anyone on the left who's propping her up, they're just being willful idiots, and she's not even trying to appeal to them anymore.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. She did used to go on kind of left-wing shows, on shows that were still loyal to the Democratic Party, but did that kind of like pretending to be angry about neoliberalism and the like. And she wouldn't even show her face there anymore because she can't get asked one critical question. She confines herself now to the studios of CNN and MSNBC and these Pod Save America type podcasts where she's treated basically, the transformation is complete. She basically is Nancy Pelosi now. Politico welcomed her to the fold just a few months ago with an article entitled, The Evolution of AOC. And the subheadline was something like, she went from being an outsider to the ultimate team player. The thing that I find so sickening about it is that in reality, she and Bernie, who convinced people they were waging a war against the Democratic establishment, as you say, if you turn on Rachel Maddow or Chris Hayes or Anderson Cooper or read the op-ed page of the New York Times, you know what you're getting. Those are people who are hardcore partisans of the Democratic Party. They're speaking to hardcore partisans of the Democratic Party. They're not hiding who they are. They're exactly who they say they are, which is they want you to vote Democrat all the time. What makes AOC and Bernie so insidious is that in a lot of ways, they've become the most important weapon of the Democratic Party establishment. It's the most valuable asset. At the same time, they were pretending to undermine it because you don't need to convince Rachel Maddow fans to go and vote Democrat. They're going to vote Democrat no matter what. What you need are the kind of younger people who don't really like the Democratic Party, whose self-identity depends on keeping the Democratic Party at a distance, who may not vote, who may vote for Cornel West as a protest. And AOC and Bernie are the ones who lead those people, the ones you really need to get out their asses and go vote every 2 years and to vote for the Democratic Party without fail. So at the same time, they're telling people and collecting money based on the fraudulent image that they're enemies of the Democratic Party establishment. They, in fact, are its most important instruments.
And it really makes me upset because I was part of the Bernie campaign. And I don't know if you remember the Bernie Sanders rallies. And I remember there'd be a lot of seniors or any person struggling with disease or anyone struggling with poverty. These people would give their testimony at these Bernie rallies. I don't know if you guys remember this. And they were talking about how we were bankrupt. I'm just giving an example. They were talking about how they're bankrupted because they don't have Medicare for all, et cetera, et cetera. They would be damn near crying. And when the whole crowd would be crying to Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders and AOC would look these people right in their eyes and say, we will fight for you. We will fight for your health care. Meanwhile, Medicare for all is dead. They're endorsing a guy who said they would veto Medicare for all. What? That's absolutely disgusting.
He said he would veto it. He would veto it, even if it passed.
Yes. Even if somehow Bernie and AOC did a miracle and got it to pass, Biden would veto it. And AOC is not putting even any pressure on them. In fact, Biden helped privatize Medicaid and helped kick millions of people off their insurance. I give David Soroda a lot of props for reporting on that. So Biden kicked off millions of people off of healthcare, and the healthcare champion, Bernie Sanders, endorsed that guy. After looking at cancer patient in the eye, and you look at YouTube, I'm sure all of them still up. Looks all these people in the eye and said, we will fight for you. These people with medical debt. I got family suffer from medical debt. They look me in the eye and they say they're going to fight for us. And now they completely capitulated to the worst neoliberal war criminal scumbags. Once again, the reckoning just started. They don't even know what's coming. Like this, he's going to continue.